Although Brian Williams was forced to apologize for inaccuracies in a story that he has told multiple times about his time in Iraq, there are a number of complicating factors. And one of those complicating factors is that while he was apologizing, the pilot of the helicopter that he was flying in that day back in 2003 was largely confirming the details of the story that Brian Williams has told. That pilot, Rich Krell, told Brian Stelter of CNN, some of the things he said are not true. But some of the things they're saying against him are not true either. And so many people weren't sure exactly what to think. They saw Brian Williams going and apologizing on the air, but they also saw someone who was there, who has no reason to be biased, confirming what Williams has said. Unfortunately, however, that pilot is now changing his story. In a text message sent to CNN, he said, "The information I gave you was true based on my memories. But at this point, I am questioning my memories that I may have forgotten or left something out. For the past 12 years, I have been trying to forget everything that happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now that I let it back, the nightmares come back with it, so I want to forget again." And so that was one of the few things propping up his story, but it looks like that might not be true either. Although, again, it is possible that Rich Krell was remembering correctly. He's not saying that he's definitely wrong. He's saying he has reason to question himself in his own memory.
So let me just lay this out super, super clearly. Brian Williams at first says the helicopter I was in a formation of helicopters, 4 helicopters, and we took an RPG. We went down, but we were okay. And this
Forced to land, yes.
Yeah, forced to land, right?
And then the soldiers protected them, surrounded them, and protected them from enemy fire.
Yeah. And these guys saved his life. Okay. Now, when the pilot initially came out after all that story was questioned, he was the one guy who said, look, we didn't get an RPG. The helicopter in front of us took an RPG, but we all took small arms fire. Okay, so they were firing from the ground, bullets, and we all took that, right? So it's kind of true, kind of not true. It's a little, if the pilot is right, I think a lot of people go, oh, he just misremembered, the RPG went that way instead of this way, and they did get hit, it just wasn't with an RPG. Now, everybody else was saying, no, he wasn't anywhere near the helicopters that took the RPG and the small arms fire.
Half an hour later, he flew over that area.
He flew in and landed half an hour to an hour later. So now when the pilot says, yeah, I might have remembered that wrong, maybe we didn't take any fire, right? Well, then it puts Brian in a lot of trouble. Okay.
Although, again, he has already apologized. And he didn't really, in his apology, he didn't really hedge himself and say, well, some parts weren't true, but other parts were largely true. He overall apologized for telling the story in the first place, I think.
Yeah, it was one of the shittiest apologies I've seen in a long time.
I disagree. I feel like when you read what Rich Krell said, based on that, he could have held on to a larger portion of the story than he did in his apology. But I don't think that he did that. I think that he pretty much tried to back off the entire thing. Although he did try to sort of wrap himself up in respect for the military and all of that. There was a lot of that.
There was all that. It was like, so maybe I might have told the story. I love the military. You guys are so brave and great. And when I said this, a bunch of brave, great military people called me out who are brave and great and risked their lives to save us, and I thank them. And then they called me out for it. And then when I said they're great and brave, it was left and right. He couldn't fucking help himself. And it was, again, even one of the soldiers I was reading in Stars and Stripes said, yeah, he kind of downplayed what he did. And he did downplay what he did in his apology, and he kept wrapping himself in the flag and the bravery.
He wanted to make sure that he thanked the members of the military, and he kept forgetting he'd already done it.
Yeah. So they call that stolen valor, and that's exactly what he's doing. This all started because last Friday, he did a news story about he went to the Rangers game, the hockey game in New York City, with one of the guys that he met there on that mission, who he said saved him or protected him. And they've kept be friends. So they went to and Brian goes, I invited him to the Rangers game. And lo and behold, the Rangers organization stopped the game and they did a big announcement and they put them up on the Jumbotron. And there happened to be a camera in front of Brian Williams and that guy, and they had a camera ready, and they told a story about Brian Williams' helicopter being crippled by an RPG. They told that everybody went crazy, and I'm like, well, isn't that great that the Rangers did some investigating and they found out that Brian Williams was going to be at the game with that guy? How did they find that out? I have no idea. They're good. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe Brian Williams and NBC News did this all for a fucking PR photo op, which is exactly what they did. Brian Williams didn't call this guy up and want to hang out with him as buddies. They go, hey, we got a great PR thing. I'll take this guy to the Rangers game. We'll announce it. We'll have the thing. And then I'll do a news story about it on the news the next day. Except he told the big fucking lie that pissed off those guys and they'd had it. So there's a lot of levels of slime and stolen valor in this, and he's not stopping. By the way, even in his apology, he's stealing valor. So this is just, by the way, a small window into the bigger bullshit liar that Brian Williams is. He's been a fucking liar since he started, okay? And we all know that he brought on retired generals on his news show to give us a straight dope about what was happening in Iraq. And he didn't tell us that those generals were on the payroll of defense contractors, and they would always argue for more war and more money to be spent on the war. Brian Williams never told us that those guys were in the pocket of defense contractors, but the guy who did tell us that won a Pulitzer Prize for it in the New York Times. Brian Williams still never told his viewers about that, and that's why he's been a bullshitting cheerleader for war since day one, and this just exposes him. He's lied about Katrina. Now we've caught him in lies about that. He said he saw bodies floating face down in the French Quarter. It wasn't flooded. French Quarter wasn't flooded. He said he got dysentery by eating flooded water. He didn't get this. The guys down there said nobody got dysentery. So I'll stop talking, but this just is a typical thing Brian Williams does. This isn't a atypical thing.
So there are parts of that I disagree with, but I want to let Des
Okay,
jump
first
in
of all, today the Ritz-Carlton Hotel and the people down in New Orleans, reporters actually came out and said, oh, we found some photographs that show that, yes, there was flooding in that part of the French Quarter where the Ritz-Carlton is, and he was staying at the Ritz-Carlton. So there's that. But as far as the dysentery, that's probably made up. Who knows?
Yeah.
So
He actually got
that's
that
just a small
outside of
point.
New Orleans at a Taco Bell.
There you go. So that's just one small correction on that. So please go ahead.
Okay, so we've done countless stories on the show about how people remember things wrong, right? And that we convict people on those false memories, and that we should not rely on those false memories as much as we do as a society. So before I even get into any of that, I should admit an enormous bias in favor of Brian Williams. Okay, that's shocking, right? And so I'm being honest with the audience. I know Brian Williams a little bit, and he was really decent to me. Okay, and he's a smart guy, he's a funny guy, he's a charming guy. Okay, that's my bias. Okay, so I'm being upfront about that. So my inclination is to defend him, honestly. Okay, now, then so having said that, let me agree with the most important thing that Jimmy's saying. Okay, so him not being clear about the generals and how they're out there actually working for defense contractors and pushing the Abrams tank and pushing all the different equipment that they're selling while not disclosing it to the audience is absolutely true and is devastating. And it is representative of all the things that the mainstream media does wrong, which is they feed you pro-war guys, pro-defense contractor guys, and they never tell you. They make it sound like that they're, honest brokers. So for me, that's a much worse crime.
Yeah.
And so now to my defense of Brian Williams, I don't know. I think, and this is a medium defense of him, because people want to be heroes, right?
Yeah.
People want to remember things more heroically. So did he have dysentery? Of course I have no idea. None of us have any idea. We weren't in the bathroom with him, right? But probably he had diarrhea and called it dysentery to make it sound more warlike, right? And did somebody at some point say, hey, watch drinking bottled water in front of people, because not a lot of people have bottled water? Probably. Did anybody threaten his life? I don't know, right? So Jimmy, when you say he's exaggerating some of the stories, that certainly rings true, right? And here's a story where everybody admits that eventually, an hour later, Brian Williams lands, sees the helicopters that were ahead of him that took fire, and then they stay in the desert because there was this terrible sandstorm, and he stayed in the desert in the helicopters for 2 days. They lost contact with him, and that was a harrowing experience. Did he then go on to exaggerate it? It certainly seems that way, right? Maybe he did it on purpose. I don't know. Maybe he didn't do it on purpose. Maybe he remembered it wrong. And then you want to say, hey, you know what? Come on, dude. Okay, don't, your whole line about stolen valor, don't do that. And I think the first person who would say now, you're so right, I'm so sorry, is Brian Williams. But most of all, more than anything else, I feel like we're pummeling this guy as if like it's his fault, right? The bigger problems that you lay out. The reality is it's the system's fault. If it wasn't Brian Williams, it'd be Joe Jablowski, and he would have had the same generals on They would have told the same things. They wouldn't have disclosed it. All of it would remain the same. And by making it seem as if, aha, we caught the one liar on TV, right? It makes a mockery of the whole thing. So if you want to hit him for being part of the system, I agree with you. If you want to say he's extraordinary and he's like worse than the rest of the guys, I don't agree at all.
Yeah.
So that's my sense.
No.
I mean, if you're
ahead.
creating like a list of hawks in the media, I don't think that he would be near the top. I mean, there is the thing with the generals. I think that largely members of the media aren't nearly clear enough about who is funding their guests, who they've previously worked for, and things like that. And that, by the way, includes all the politicians they have on. They never make clear, oh, so our next guest is going to be Congressman so-and-so, and his 3 highest donors are these 3 organizations. That would be useful information, too. We constantly point out liars, and I think that there is value to pointing out liars, especially in the media, because of the influence that they have. But if the consequence of the lie is that he wants to look better, or he wants to look more heroic, or something like that, well, that is only what I feel like every human being I've ever met would do.
Oh my
Anybody in that helicopter would have lied about it, because that's what people do.
I was in
feel like
Afghanistan.
Yeah, were you?
I was in Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah, you were. That's right. That's right.
I was in Afghanistan. And if an RPG hit my plane, I would fucking remember. And one didn't, and I fucking remember that too. So that is bullshit. He didn't
I'm not
fucking
saying it's not bullshit,
misremember
but
it.
I'm saying it's not the same thing. There are lies that are far
And
more
what about the
consequential
Rangers
than someone
game?
lying about their
What
personal.
about the bullshit? I mean, if that doesn't reveal
That's just
Brian
American
Williams
That's
jingoism.
opportunistic.
That's-
you
to
know.
be the slime, that's slimy.
That's totally
Yeah,
slimy.
it's the same as when they bring
Slimy.
soldiers to the
But
State of the
Jimmy,
Union. I don't like to
that's-
see any of that.
And he's trying to pretend like he didn't go, hey, guess what? He goes, then guess what the Rangers decided to do? They decided to honor him. No, you decided to engineer a PR stunt that would make you look better than you are. And you used people risking their life for a fucking lie, by the way, that you cheerleaded on.
Okay.
That's the big problem there, Cenk. That he's using these guys that had to fight for a lie, which was the Iraq War, that he cheerleaded on.
Okay, but again, that's to the central point of everybody on TV at the time did that, which they're all guilty for.
Right, and then-
okay?
but then the
But
Rangers
pa-
game.
I
but
feel
the
like
Rangers
those are the lies that we should be talking about. The lies that got us to the war, not the lie about a journalist about when he
Yeah,
was at
and-
the war.
so let me add
like, that's
one-
bad, and it makes him a dick,
I-
maybe. But it's not like he didn't send us to war necessarily. We
Right.
should talk about those.
I really want to get to Desi's thoughts on this. I just got to add one last thing. I feel like it would scapegoat Brian Williams to just throw him under the bus as if he's the one responsible for the Iraq War and the lies, and then the media, the rest of the, Jimmy, what I'm worried about, I think you should be something you're worried about, right? Which is that the rest of the media then get to feel smug
Yes.
and self-satisfied.
Yes.
We
Yes.
found the one guy who told a couple of lies, and that was the problem. That's the fact that we all
I know.
lied. The fact that
Like
when
with
we
Dan
went to
Rather.
when we went to war with Iraq, 69% of Americans thought that Saddam Hussein had done 9/11.
Right.
Personally done 9/11. So the entire media complex let them, 7 out of 10 Americans believe that Saddam Hussein had attacked
Right.
us when they hadn't. That is the biggest grotesque failure
No,
of the
did they-
media ever. So was Brian Williams a part of that? Yes. Okay. But now, if you do this, they say problem solved. We got the one guy. We got the way that was him,
Accountability.
right? And we had accountability. And look at what a wonderful press we are.
I
And,
understand.
and
You're
we
right.
policed ourselves.
You're right. No, you're definitely right about that. That is going to be a negative consequence of Brian Williams getting caught in this particular lie.
I don't have a dog in this hunt. My question is basically based on the science. Did he know he was lying? Was he one of those people whose memories got messed up in time? There was this study that I looked up, Iowa State University. It was 2013. They found that every time you repeat a memory, it's like opening up a document on your computer, and you are at risk of changing it. You can edit, you can delete it, and somebody can actually infiltrate and influence those memories, rewrite those memories, so that what you think you remember is not actually what happened. I mean, this is well documented. This is a large body of study that backs this up. You guys have talked about this.
Yeah.
Whether that's what's happened to Brian Williams, I don't know. I don't even know that I really care. If he gets drubbed out, then okay.
I'm not saying we should sweep this under the rug, and Brian Williams didn't do anything wrong, and he's a lovely guy, and we should pat him on the back and move on with our lives. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, here's the deal I propose, which of course is never going to happen, right? So find me the guys at MSNBC who fired Phil Donahue and who put Ashley Banfield in a closet for speaking out against the Iraq War. Those are executives, right?
But Brian Williams, he fought for them, right?
Okay, so when you find me those executives and you say, hey, you guys were the most actively involved, and it's the same company, it's under the umbrella of NBC. You were the most involved in lying to the American people. You fired people who told the truth, okay? You actively engineered this lie upon it wasn't an accident, it wasn't a forgotten memory, it wasn't any of that.
Yeah.
So if you say, if NBC, who's gonna take action here, says, I got those guys, I got Brian Williams, and I'm firing them all, then I say we have a deal. Okay, but what I don't want, and firing Brian Williams, I actually don't have a strong opinion on. I get what you're saying, Jimmy, and a lot of the points you make are valid. I also get the whole point about the memories and scapegoating him is my point, right? But I just don't want it to help their process of burying the truth by saying we got the one lone wolf who misremembered a couple of things, and that's the only thing wrong with the press, and we cleaned it all up now.
Yes, you're correct, and we all share, I think, your concern about
Absolutely.
that. But this is the exact kind of lie that made Holly Hunter break up with Brian Williams in broadcast news.
Well, maybe that should be turned into some kind of campaign. So NBC says that they are going to investigate Brian Williams on this. Great. Maybe there should be a huge public outcry for NBC, investigate yourself.
Yeah, look into the whole thing. Don't nitpick and say, okay, I found a little problem here, and maybe he had dysentery or didn't have dysentery in Hurricane Katrina, and maybe they took small arms fire or they didn't take small arms fire. No, I'm doing a real investigation. What happened? What do we do at NBC News about war, about how we cover war, how we glamorize war, how do we treat the military? All the aspects of how we treat the military, right? But instead, Jimmy, if you get your way and he's fired, here's what's going to happen. They're going to say, we got rid of this guy because this son of a bitch was this stolen valor, didn't treat the military right. And the lesson that all the other news actors are going to get is, oh my God, whatever you do, if there's anything involved in the military, on all fours, oh yes, military. So they're going to get the exact wrong lesson.
So you're right. I don't want him to get fired, actually. I don't want him to be fired. I want him to have to stay there. I don't want him to be fired. You're right. And just for one of that reason and the other reason of that, we can always hold this over his head. Maybe this will make him a better newsman. I don't think it will.
What bothers me to my core is that they're pretending to be ethical. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So they're pretending like Brian Williams is the one guy they caught who is not ethical, right? Mm-hmm. And they're gonna show how ethical they are by going to get him, right? But the rest of them are swell people who give a shit about the news, who care about delivering the truth. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? The whole thing's a fucking theater, man. It's all a theater, right? And it's all these guys who are reading from a prompter. It's all these guys whose producer wrote this stuff, and if the producer wrote the wrong stuff, got fired, and the corporate executives put in a new producer who would write the right stuff for them to read. So don't spare me. CNN's all over this, right? Please, the news actors at CNN, you're the worst of the worst. Spare me your righteous indignation about how you found one guy in news who's lying. The whole fucking news is a lie. All of television news is a lie, right? So I think that's what's bothering me at my core, their righteous indignation.